The crystal cities of Thalon Prime burned in the darkness of space. Ambassador Kira watched through the observation window as another transport ship exploded in a brilliant flash of light. The hegemony destroyers moved like hungry beasts, tearing apart everything in their path. Her four slender arms pressed against the cold metal wall as she tried to stop shaking. "How many more ships?" she asked Captain Vela, her voice barely a whisper. 12 civilian transports still trying to escape, Vela replied, his blue skin pale with fear. "The hegemony fleet has us surrounded. Our defense satellites are gone. The orbital platforms are destroyed." Kira closed her large eyes and felt tears roll down her face. Zealoty had never built weapons of war. They grew food, created art, and studied the stars. They had no armies, no battleships, no soldiers trained to kill. Their entire civilization was built on peace and cooperation. Ambassador Vela said quietly, "The quantum transmitter is still working. We could send a message before they destroy the command center." Kira nodded slowly. It was their last hope. Maybe somewhere in the galaxy, someone would hear their cry for help. Maybe someone would care enough to save them. She walked to the transmitter room on unsteady legs. The machine hummed with power, its crystal core glowing bright blue. Kira had never used it to beg for help before. The Zealoty were proud people, even in their gentleness. But pride meant nothing when your entire species faced extinction. "Begin recording," she said to the technician. The red light blinked on. Kira took a deep breath and began to speak. "To any who receive this transmission, I am Ambassador Kira of the Zealoty Confederation. Our worlds are burning. Our people are dying. The hegemony has come to destroy us, and we have no way to fight back. We are a peaceful people with no weapons of war, no armies to defend ourselves. We have lived for thousands of years without violence, creating beauty and knowledge. Now, the hegemony devours our worlds, one by one. We beg any civilization capable of military aid, please help us survive." Her voice broke as she finished. The technician stopped recording and sent the message out across the galaxy through the quantum network. It would reach every major civilization. Within hours, the response was immediate and heartbreaking. Most worlds simply ignored the message. The Altarian Empire sent back a cold reply. "The Zealoty Confederation is outside our sphere of influence. We will not risk war with the hegemony." The Corvan Republic was even crueler. "Weak species deserve their fate. The strong rule the galaxy." Civilizations actually laughed at the message. Zealoty had always been seen as soft as prey animals who somehow managed to reach the stars. Now they were proving that reputation right. But on a small blue world in the Outer Rim, the message found different ears. Admiral June sat in his office high above the Pacific Ocean, watching the waves crash against the rocky shore below. The transmission had arrived 3 hours ago, and he had read it 5 times. The 40-year-old officer had gray hair mixed with black earned during the brutal fighting on Mars 10 years earlier. He had seen enough war to know what the hegemony would do to the Zealoty. "Computer, connect me to President Nari," he said. The hologram appeared instantly. President Nari looked tired, her dark eyes showing the weight of leading humanity through difficult times. "Admiral, I assume this is about the Zealoty message?" "Yes, Madam President. I recommend we respond immediately. The Third Fleet can be ready to deploy within the month." President Nari was quiet for a long moment. "Admiral, the hegemony has ruled the inner galaxy for 300 years. They have never been defeated. We would be risking everything. The Zealoty are dying, Madam President. They called for help. If we don't answer, who will?" President Nari closed her eyes. She thought about her own children, safe in their beds on Earth. She thought about the Zealoty children who would never see another sunrise if the hegemony won. "Prepare the Third Fleet, Admiral. We answer the call." The announcement went out across Earth and its colonies 12 hours later. President Nari stood before the United Earth Council and spoke words that would change galactic history. "The Zealoty Confederation has asked for our help. We will not abandon them to face extinction. Alone, humanity answers." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Recruitment centers on every human world filled with volunteers. Sergeant Bora had retired after the Titan mining wars, content to raise her 3 young children in peace. But when she heard about the Zealoty, she kissed her children goodbye, and re-enlisted. Commander Hannah was supposed to marry her fiancé in 2 weeks. Instead, she postponed the wedding and requested command of a destroyer squadron. Dr. Minho packed his medical supplies, knowing he would see terrible things in the battles to come. But he also knew he would save lives. Across human space, the same scene played out thousands of times. Humans who had never heard of the Zealoty volunteered to fight and die for them. Not for conquest or glory, but because someone had called for help. The Third Fleet began assembling at Jupiter Station. 47 warships, carrying 12,000 soldiers, marines, and support crew. It was the largest military force humanity had ever sent beyond its borders. They were not going as conquerors. They were going as guardians, answering a desperate cry for help from across the galaxy. The stars twisted and bent as the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace. 47 warships appeared in the Thalen system like predators emerging from the darkness. Their hulls were dark gray and covered with weapon ports. They moved in perfect formation, silent and deadly. Ambassador Kira stood on the observation deck of the Zealoty command station, her forearms pressed against the viewing window. She had expected maybe 1 or 2 ships to answer their call for help. Instead, she watched an entire battle fleet take position around their crystal cities. By the ancestors, Captain Vela whispered beside her, "Look at the size of those ships." The human flagship was 3 times larger than anything the Zealoty had ever built. Its weapons could probably destroy their entire station with 1 shot. Kira felt her legs shake as she realized what kind of beings had answered their plea. Admiral. June arrived at the station 2 hours later. The airlock opened with a hiss, and Kira got her first look at a human. He was shorter than she expected, but built like a machine made for war. His shoulders were broad, his movements quick and controlled. When he smiled at her, she saw teeth designed for tearing meat. "Ambassador Kira," he said in accented galactic standard. "I am Admiral June of the Terran Defense Fleet. We received your message." "We are grateful," Kira replied, trying not to show her fear. "We expected perhaps a squadron to help us escape. You brought an armada." Admiral June's smile became wider and more frightening. "The hegemony has ruled this part of the galaxy unchallenged for too long. That changes now." The casual way he spoke about war made Kira's skin crawl. Humans talked about fighting and killing like the Zealoty discussed growing flowers. There was no fear in his voice, only excitement. Back on the human flagship, Colonel Sioke gathered his Marines in the briefing room. 300 soldiers sat in perfect rows, their armor black and threatening. They carried weapons that could punch holes through starship hulls. "Listen up," Colonel Sioke said, pointing at the holographic display. "The hegemony species we'll be fighting are bigger and stronger than us, but they're slow and stupid. They've been bullying weak civilizations for so long, they've forgotten how to fight real soldiers." The Marines laughed at this. Several Zealoty observers watched from the back of the room, horrified by the humans' casual attitude toward violence. These beings spoke about killing with the same tone they might use to discuss their lunch. "Lieutenant." Wu stood up and began demonstrating combat techniques. Her movements were smooth and deadly, like a hunting cat. She showed her squad how to kill hegemony warriors with their bare hands, how to use their smaller size as an advantage. "Remember," she said as she twisted an imaginary enemy's neck, "we're not the biggest predators in the galaxy, but we're the smartest." The Zealoty observers fled the room in terror. Meanwhile, in hegemony space, War Commander Vorth studied the intelligence reports with amusement. His massive reptilian form filled the command chair on his flagship. He was 3 meters tall and weighed as much as 5 humans. His teeth could bite through steel, and his claws could tear apart armor. "Humans," he said, his voice like grinding stone. "From Earth, a Class 4 death world. Interesting." His second in command, a creature that looked like a walking nightmare, leaned closer. "Should we be concerned, War Commander? They brought a significant fleet." Vorth laughed. a sound like breaking rocks. 47 ships against our 300? These mammals think they can challenge species that have ruled the galaxy for centuries. Deploy the 7th Assault Fleet. Show these newcomers what happens. When prey pretends to be predator, the order went out across hegemony space. War fleets began moving toward the Thalan system, confident in their superiority. They had destroyed 1,000 civilizations. What was one more? Dr. Minho worked in the medical bay of the human flagship, studying Zealy biology with growing concern. The alien bodies were beautiful, but incredibly fragile. Their bones were hollow like bird bones. Their skin was thin and easily torn. They had no natural weapons, no instinct for violence. They're like living artwork, he told Nurse Yuna as they prepared medical supplies. Look at these scans. Their entire evolution focused on intelligence and cooperation. They never needed to fight anything. Nurse Yuna nodded as she organized. Surgical tools. No wonder the hegemony is winning. These people are defenseless. Dr. Minho compared the Zealy scans to human anatomy. Humans had thick bones, strong muscles, and bodies designed to survive in a hostile world. Every part of the human form was built for violence, even if they chose to use it for protection instead of conquest. We evolved on a world that tried to kill us every day, he said quietly. They evolved in paradise. Our entire species is shaped by millions of years of warfare against nature itself. He thought about his own childhood on Earth, learning to swim in oceans full of predators, hiking through forests where everything was poisonous or had teeth. The Zealy children probably grew up in gardens, never knowing fear. Perhaps he told Nurse Yuna as they prepared for the coming battle. That's exactly why we need to protect them. Beauty deserves to exist in this galaxy, even if it can't defend itself. The two fleets moved toward each other through the darkness of space, Predator and Guardian on a collision course that would change the galaxy forever. The asteroid field around Zerion 7 looked empty and dead. Massive rocks floated in the darkness, spinning slowly in the cold void of space. Hidden among them, Captain Tay waited with his destroyer squadron. His ships ran on minimal power, barely visible to enemy sensors. Contact, his sensor officer whispered. Hegemony fleet approaching. 3 battle groups exactly as intelligence predicted. Captain Tay watched the enemy ships on his display. Huge vessels built like floating fortresses, bristling with weapons. War Commander Vorth had sent 75 warships to crush what he thought were scattered human defenders. The hegemony always fought with overwhelming force, using their size and numbers to terrify enemies into surrender. Hold position, Captain Tay ordered his squadron. Let them pass. The hegemony fleet moved in perfect formation, just like their military manuals taught them. They had used the same tactics for 300 years, and those tactics had never failed. Why change what worked? The massive ships passed within weapons range of the hidden human destroyers. Their crews never suspected that death waited among the asteroids. The hegemony had grown arrogant after centuries of easy victories. All units, weapons free. Admiral June's voice crackled over the communication system. Captain Tay smiled coldly. Fire. The asteroid field exploded with light and death. 20 human destroyers emerged from hiding like hunting wolves, their missile launchers spitting fire. Hundreds of rockets streaked toward the surprised hegemony fleet. The enemy ships tried to turn and fight, but they were too slow and too big. Human missiles punched through their armor like paper. 3 hegemony cruisers died in the first 30 seconds, their hulls breaking apart in brilliant explosions. Second wave launching, Captain Tay reported as his ships fired again. The human destroyers moved between the asteroids like dancers, using the rocks as cover while they picked apart the enemy fleet. On the surface of Zerion 7, Sergeant Bora crouched in the mining colony's underground tunnels. Marines waited in the darkness, their night vision goggles showing them everything the enemy could not see. The hegemony troops were coming, following their standard attack pattern. They always attack the same way, she whispered to her soldiers. Straightforward, using their size to intimidate. But down here, being big just makes you a better target. The first hegemony warrior appeared at the tunnel entrance. He was nearly 3 meters tall, covered in scales and natural armor. His claws could tear through steel, and his teeth could bite through bone. He looked like a nightmare made real, but Sergeant Bora had fought in the Titan mining wars, where humans learned to kill things much bigger than themselves. She waited until the creature was halfway through the narrow tunnel, then opened fire. Her rifle spat bullets faster than the eye could follow. The hegemony warrior stumbled and fell, his massive body blocking the tunnel behind him. The other enemies tried to push past their dead companion, but the tunnel was too narrow. Move. Bora ordered her squad. They flowed through the underground passages like water, appearing behind the confused enemy soldiers. In the cramped tunnels, the hegemony's size became a weakness instead of a strength. Private Dury held the main corridor alone, while his squad repositioned. He was only 19 years old, fresh from training on Earth. 3 hegemony shock troops charged at him, each one weighing more than a small vehicle. They expected the young human to run or die. Instead, Private Dury stood his ground and fired. His rifle never stopped shooting, the bullets finding weak spots in alien armor with deadly precision. The first attacker fell, then the second. The third reached him just as his backup arrived. "Good work, kid," Sergeant Bora said, as she helped. "Finish off the last enemy. Your parents would be proud." In space above the colony, Commander Hannah led her destroyer squadron in a dance of death. Her ships moved between asteroids like birds flying through a forest, using gravity and momentum to impossible effect. The hegemony captains watched in confusion as human vessels performed maneuvers that should have torn them apart. "How are they doing that?" War Commander Vorth demanded from his flagship. His own ships were built for straight-line attacks, not the flowing combat style the humans used. Commander Hannah's destroyers used the asteroids themselves as weapons, nudging large rocks into collision courses with enemy ships. They fired missiles that curved around obstacles, guided by computers that calculated trajectories in real time. Her pilots had trained in Earth's asteroid belt, where flying wrong meant instant death. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, the hegemony fleet was running for their lives. Nearly half their ships floated dead in space, torn apart by an enemy they had underestimated completely. War Commander Vorth stared at his tactical display in shock. In 3 centuries of warfare, the hegemony had never retreated from a battle. They were the apex predators of the galaxy, the ultimate hunters. How had these mammals defeated them? The answer came from his intelligence officer. "Sir, the humans come from a Class 4 death world. Their entire evolution was shaped by surviving in hell itself. They're not just soldiers, they're survivors who learned to fight everything their planet could throw at them." Across the galaxy, news of the battle spread like wildfire. The hegemony, undefeated for centuries, had been crushed by newcomers from the outer rim. The balance of power was shifting, and everyone knew it. For the first time in their history, the hegemony had tasted defeat. And they discovered they did not like the flavor. The high command chamber on the fortress world of Kareth was built to intimidate. Massive columns stretched toward a ceiling lost in shadow, and the air itself seemed to whisper of ancient conquests. War Commander Vorth stood in the center, surrounded by the galaxy's most feared predator species. Lord Krex towered above him, his tentacles writhing with barely controlled anger. The creature looked like a living nightmare, with eyes like black holes and a mouth full of razor teeth. "You lost 2 mammals, Vorth. Soft, weak creatures from the outer rim." "The humans are not what they appear," Vorth replied, his voice steady despite his fear. "Our intelligence was wrong, completely wrong." Lord Krex's laugh sounded like breaking glass. "They're prey species, just like the Zealothi. One lucky victory means nothing. Send more ships, crush them." But the intelligence reports told a different story. Fleet Admiral Nexus, a being made of living metal, accessed the data files with a thought. The human homeworld is classified as Hell Class by galactic standards. 90% of all species that evolved there went extinct. The planet itself is a weapon. The chamber fell silent. Hell Class worlds were rare in the galaxy, places where life clung to existence through constant warfare against the environment itself. Most civilizations avoided such worlds entirely. Their weather systems can destroy entire cities, Admiral Nexus continued. Their oceans are filled with predators. Their land masses shift and change without warning. Even their microscopic life forms are engaged in constant battle. Humans didn't just survive on this world, they thrived. Meanwhile, deep in hegemony space, Major Yek moved through the fortress world of Grimhold like a ghost. His special forces team had been dropped behind enemy lines 3 days ago, and they were already causing chaos. Grimhold was supposed to be impregnable. Built on a planet with crushing gravity and toxic atmosphere, it housed the hegemony's most important military installations. No enemy had ever set foot on its surface, until now. Major Yek led his team through an environment that would kill most galactic species in minutes. The gravity was 3 times Earth normal, the air was poison, and the temperature could melt steel. But humans had evolved on a world that tried to kill them every day. Target acquired, whispered Sergeant Q through the comm system. Ammunition depot, just like the intelligence report said, the team moved with deadly precision. They had trained for this mission in Earth's deepest ocean trenches, where pressure could crush submarines. They had practiced in the Sahara Desert, where the heat could cook a person alive. They had learned to fight in the vacuum of space itself. The explosions began at midnight, local time. Grimhold's defenses crumbled as human saboteurs struck targets across the planet. Weapons factories, communication centers, fuel depots, all went up in flames, while the hegemony garrison scrambled to respond. How are they moving so fast? Demanded the fortress commander. Our sensors show them in 5 different locations at once. His aide checked the readings again. Sir, they're operating in the industrial sector. The radiation levels there would kill most species in hours? Then how are the humans surviving? The aide had no answer. Back on the human medical ship, Dr. Minho examined his first hegemony prisoners. The massive predators had been brought in after the battle at Zerion 7, wounded but alive. They filled the medical bay with their presence, each one larger than 3 humans combined. But something strange happened when humans entered the room. These creatures, who had terrorized the galaxy for centuries, pressed themselves against the walls in fear. Their eyes followed every human movement with the desperate attention of cornered prey. Interesting, Dr. Minho said to Nurse Yuna. They're afraid of us. He approached the largest prisoner, a hegemony commander whose scales were harder than armor plating. Creature tried to make itself smaller as Dr. Minho examined its wounds. We studied your biology, Dr. Minho told the alien through a translator. Your species evolved to be perfect predators. Big, strong, fast. You're designed to hunt and kill. He paused, meeting the creature's terrified gaze. Not our species. Evolved to survive being hunted by 1,000 different threats. We learned to kill the things that tried to kill us. The commander's translator rendered his whispered reply. What kind of world creates such monsters? The kind of world that makes you earn your place in the food chain every single day. Dr. Minho replied. Captain Somi returned from her reconnaissance mission with disturbing news for the hegemony. Her stealth ship had observed human combat operations across 3 star systems, and what she saw defied everything the hegemony thought they knew about warfare. Humans didn't fight like other species. They turned every environment into a weapon. On ice worlds, they used avalanches to crush enemy positions. On desert planets, they buried themselves in sand and struck from below. In space, they used gravity wells and radiation fields to channel enemy fleets into killing zones. They fight like their homeworld taught them, she reported to the High Command. Every battle becomes a test of survival, and they've been passing that test for millions of years. The truth was becoming clear to the hegemony's leadership. Earth hadn't sent soldiers to fight them. Earth had sent its children to show the galaxy what real monsters look like. And for the first time in centuries, the hegemony was learning what it felt like to be prey. The hegemony was dying, and everyone in the galaxy could see it happening. 3 major predator species had already withdrawn from the Alliance after watching human forces tear apart their fleets. The Corvan Republic signed a separate peace treaty with Earth, admitting that they could not face humanity's military power. The Altarian Empire followed 2 weeks later, leaving the hegemony with less than half its original strength. War Commander. Vorth sat in his exile on a barren moon at the galaxy's edge, watching the news feeds with growing despair. Former hegemony worlds were requesting human protection, abandoning their old masters for new guardians. The empire that had ruled for 3 centuries was crumbling in less than 2 years. How did it happen so fast? He asked his aide, who was also in exile. The humans don't fight like us, the aide replied. We conquer through fear. They protect through strength. Other species see the difference. On the Zealy capital world, Ambassador Kira stood beside Admiral June on the observation deck of the orbital station. Caught the light of twin suns, their surfaces reflecting rainbow colors across the planet's surface. For the first time in decades, no enemy ships darkened their skies. Look at them, Kira said, pointing to her people moving freely through the floating gardens. Children playing in the open air, families gathering without fear. Yugabaza back. Our lives. Admiral June watched a group of young Zealy dancing in one of the crystal plazas. Their 4 arms moved in patterns that looked like flowering plants swaying in the wind. It was beautiful and peaceful. Everything the hegemony had tried to destroy. We didn't save you, he said quietly. We just helped you save yourselves. The formal treaty signing took place aboard the human flagship 3 days later. President Nari arrived with a full diplomatic escort, her shuttle docking with careful ceremony. The Terran Zealy Defense Pact would be humanity's first major alliance with another galactic civilization. The treaty hall was filled with representatives from both species. Humans in their military uniforms stood beside Zealy in flowing robes of crystal fiber. The contrast was striking. Warriors and artists, predators and gardeners, united by mutual respect. This alliance changes everything, President Nari said as she signed the document. We're no longer alone in the galaxy, and neither are you, Ambassador. Kira added her signature with trembling hands. Our children will grow up in a galaxy where the strong protect the weak, not prey upon them. The celebration lasted 3 days, but the real work was just beginning. General COC, recently promoted from colonel, established the Terran Defense Corps headquarters on Thalen Station. The massive facility would coordinate human military assistance across dozens of worlds, but it wasn't just about weapons and soldiers. We're not building an empire, General SEOACOC told his staff during their first meeting. We're building a network of protection. Every species we help becomes stronger. Every world we defend makes the galaxy safer, human military advisors began. Training Zealy security forces, teaching them basic combat techniques and defensive strategies. The Zealy would never be warriors like humans, but they could learn to protect themselves from future threats in return. Zealy scientists shared their advanced, peaceful technologies with Earth. Their medical knowledge could heal injuries that human doctors had considered impossible to treat. Their agricultural techniques could feed billions without harming the environment. Dr. Minho opened the first joint human Zealy medical facility in the orbital city above Thalen Prime. The hospital combined human trauma expertise with Zealy healing arts, creating treatments that neither species could have developed alone. Amazing, Nurse Yuna whispered as she watched a Zealy healer work. The alien's 4 hands moved over a patient's wounds, encouraging the body's natural healing process to work faster. They don't fight disease, they convince it to leave. But Zealy healer looked up at her with large, gentle eyes. Your people fight everything, even sickness. We prefer to make peace with the body itself. Perhaps together, we can find better ways. Across the galaxy, the changes continued. Former hegemony worlds requested human protection, offering trade agreements and mutual defense pacts. Species that had lived in fear for centuries began to hope again. Captain Tay, now promoted to Admiral, addressed the first graduating class of the Terran Defense Academy. The new facility on Thalen Station would train officers from dozens of species, all learning to work together for mutual protection. Remember why we're here, Admiral Tay told the cadets. We didn't come to the galaxy to conquer it. We came because someone called for help, and humans answered that call. When you wear this uniform, you're not monsters or killers, you're guardians. Cadets, humans, Zealy, and several other species stood at attention. They represented something new in galactic history, a military force dedicated to protection rather than conquest. War Commander Vorth watched the ceremony on his exile moon, finally understanding what had defeated the hegemony. It wasn't human weapons or tactics. It was their refusal to let the innocent face extinction alone. The galaxy's weakest had called for help, and Earth's monsters had answered. But they had come not as destroyers, but as protectors. They had proven that true strength lay not in the ability to take life, but in the willingness to preserve it. The age of predators hunting unopposed among the stars was over. A new era had begun. One where guardians watched over the weak and the strong served something greater than themselves. Humanity's greatest weapon had never been their technology or their tactics. It was their compassion and their absolute refusal to abandon those who needed help.